Vanakkam, friends. This is AR RM Arun. I'm the president of the Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SICI. On behalf of SICI, I take great pleasure in wishing each one of you a very happy 2021. Also, on behalf of SICI, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guest for today, Mr. Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO, Zoho Corporation. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to each one of you who've taken the time to join us for this useful session this evening. I'm sure quite a lot of you will be surprised with my backdrop for today as well as my attire, but I'm sure you would get to know about it during the course of today's event. As most of you would be aware, SICI has just completed 110 years of service to industry, government, and society. During these 110 years, SICI has conducted several programs, events, seminars for the benefit of our stakeholders. During this time, we have had several eminent speakers join us and address our events. Typically, they spend about 15-20 minutes of their time talking only about their area of expertise. We, however, felt that our esteemed speakers have much more to offer than just their area of expertise. That's how we came up with the concept of SICI 360. Before I continue with my current slide, I would like to draw your attention to the names and numbers of two of our executives listed on the bottom of this slide. Do take a note of it, and if any of you have a problem reconnecting during the course of today's program, please feel free to reach out to them. As I was saying, SICI 360 is a new foray for SICI, building on the experience of our seminars. We wanted to give a name that gives a multidimensional perspective to our discussion. We aim for this to be a lively discussion with our eminent guests who are experts in their fields and can share their all-round path to excellence. We also importantly look forward to our guests' inputs for our next generations. The format that we follow for the SICI 360 series is we speak about 5 sections. The first, talking about our guests' expertise. Secondly, about their organization and their role within their organization. Thirdly, we talk about their career path. Fourth, their inputs for the next generation. And finally, their inputs for society. We certainly encourage our audience to participate with us. There are 2 important guidelines that we ensure as part of this series. Number 1 is that we want our guests to be at comfort at all times. And as you would see, Mr. Sridhar Vembu is located in his favorite Tenkasi, and his favorite attire is dhoti, and that is one of the reasons why I decided to also match him for this evening. The second guideline that we have is that we would like to encourage our audience to participate with us. We encourage you to send in your questions to the host or co-host so that our SICI 360 team will be able to feed it to me. We are also particularly glad about today's event because this is our first event for this year, 2021. And also, this is the 4th session of SICI 360 that we are having after having completed 3 successful sessions over the last 3 months of last year. I'd now like to share a few words about Mr. Sridhar Vembu. According to Forbes, he's 59th richest on the list. Indians in the world, net worth of $2.5 billion. He was born in 1967 to a farmer family based in Tamil Nadu's Tanjavur district. He holds a bachelor's degree from IIT Madras when he graduated in 1989, and he also holds a master's in electrical engineering as well as a PhD from Princeton University in New Jersey. Mr. Vembu started his career at Qualcomm in San Diego as a wireless engineer, and he then moved on to the San Francisco Bay Area. In 1996, along with 2 of his brothers, he founded a software development company for network equipment providers and this was called AdventNet. The company changed its name to Zoho in 2009 to focus on software as a service support for CRM services companies. Mr. Wade recognized for having taken software product development areas into rural villages in India. He has established offices in rural Madalampare in Tamil Nadu's Tenkasi district, as well as in suburban Renigunta in Andhra Pradesh. In 2004, Mr. Vembu set up Zoho Schools to provide vocational software development education to rural students. And this was done as an alternative to formal university education. Even today, 15 to 20% of Zoho engineers have no college degrees but have received vocational education from Zoho schools. In 2020, Mr. Vembu announced the Rural School Startup that is focused on free primary education. Mr. Vembu was awarded the Dr. A.C. Muthaiah Award for First Generation Entrepreneur in 2016. As most of you would know, Dr. A.C. Muthaiah is our esteemed past president. Mr. Vembu was also awarded by Ernst & Young for its 2019 Entrepreneur of the Year award. With these few words, I would like to again extend a warm welcome to our guest this evening, Mr. Sridhar Vembu. Mr. Vembu, thank you very much for joining us as well at your end.
I'm online. I came from another device now.
Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Vembu.
Yeah, you can hear me and hopefully you can see me too now.
Yes, both are very good. Please.
Okay, good. Thank you. So
I was hoping to see you outdoors today.
Yeah, yeah. So because I wanted a better connectivity, so that's why I moved here as well, Wi-Fi connectivity. So that's why I moved indoors. So yeah, I got started with explaining Zoho and want to proceed. Within India, we have a different image as well, which is as an unusual company with a lot of interesting things we do in terms of our recruitment, our rural officers, we basically marched our own drum. That's how I'll say it. And so we play in the technology space, but we also do it unusually compared to most other companies. So that's the difference. And that unusualness is not just for the sake of being unusual, but also we believe this building a tech company, a deep-rooted, long-term tech company in India requires us to be deeply Indian first. We are an Indian technology company, and we have to understand what it means. And there's this whole idea that there's a thin layer of global citizens in India that we can build technology companies using that layer, and that's not actually possible. That we have to draw talent from the deep pool of India itself, and that means going rural, going to non-traditional things. If you have to build a tech company using only IIT, it's not actually going to be possible in India to do that. So that is the reason why we do all these things too. That to be a deep technology company from India, we also have to be a deep Indian company. That is our conviction. Okay, so
good to know that. You've been regarded as the smartest Indian entrepreneur who has turned down VC money and have still succeeded. How were you able to achieve this?
Yeah, we turned down VC money because I felt the VCs were focused on exit, and VCs are focused on IPOs, all of that. I felt that those would come in the way of building a long-term tech company in India, particularly in the Indian context. That it's very difficult to build the kind of company I wanted to build with VCs riding on our back, expecting returns all the time, all of that. It's not that financial returns are unimportant. Obviously, we need profits in order to invest. But an obsessive focus on financial results subtracts from investment in R&D, investment in culture, a lot of those things that matter in the long haul. It may matter in 10, 20 years, but VCs don't have 10, 20 years. VCs have like 7, 8 years. So that is the problem.
But when we look at entrepreneurs today or for a long time, they always have an issue trying to get financing in order to ensure the required scalability of their business. In your case, how are you able to overcome this in terms of getting the required financing that would assist your scaling up?
Yeah. So, For example, you could build a 500 crore factory to build some widget, and you can spend 5 crore in R&D. These two, I submit, are fundamentally different activities. The R&D activity is more like making a movie, and it's very different from building a factory and running a factory. So the financing required is actually much higher for a factory than for R&D. Okay, and this is often not appreciated. And if you build core technology in some area, for example, core battery technology, it might be a 20, 30, 40, 50 crore R&D project to build a good new battery technology. But to scale it up and become a factory, it could be 1,000 crore investment. These two are fundamentally different activities, and we confuse the two in terms of investment. And the battery technology requires committed people building know-how. And that is the type of activity India is under-investing in right now. We don't have enough R&D in our economy. We have a lot of financing going on for companies, but we don't do enough R&D, deep R&D. And on the other hand, East Asian companies from either countries from Japan or South Korea, Taiwan, now China, they all have invested heavily in R&D. In Chinese case, of course, in all of them, they reverse engineered Western, but now they have actually superior technology. As an example, China is a global leader in drones now. No one else competes. So this is a case where you cannot say they copied it because no one else is there to copy. They are the number one in drones right now. So that's an example where they invested heavily in this technology from the beginning. And why is India not able to do that? That is a question we must all ask ourselves. And I would submit it comes from this obsession with financing and financial returns, the trading mindset. So you have to move from the trading mindset to the making mindset for industry, and the making is R&D mindset. That is the key, and that is why in this Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I actually want to mention this point that the R&D mindset is very different from the trading mindset, that buy and sell goods. And we have to get into the R&D mindset in order to achieve results like Taiwan or results like even China lately. So.
But even when we investment that's needed for it, because you're not exactly sure when exactly you're going to get the results out of it. So for that, to be able to fund that time frame, today's entrepreneurs again have to be able to secure that kind of financing that will propel them forward.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
There are a lot of categories of R&D that are open to smaller scale innovation. And R&D does not mean you invent a whole new class of product. Whatever we consume and that we don't make in India is a direct fit target for R&D. That includes the humble nail clipper I often quote. Somebody has to figure out how to make good nail clippers in India because we import most of them today. We import all of them today. So the steel required, the cutting instruments, all of that, somebody has to figure that out. And then do backward integration. Why is the steel quality not as good? Why are the cutting instruments have to be imported? Why are the polishing instruments have to be imported? Why don't we build those machines? That is R&D, and that does not take as much investment as you would think. A few crores goes a long way. And this is not actually, yesterday I met an entrepreneur who actually has built a textile trading operation and that supports 2 or 3 people. Now he's going into textile, fabrication, the stitching together, all that he's doing from trading. And I told him, go further, deeper, invest in design. I told him, have some profit, hire some design, and then do proprietary know-how in all this. Look at the machines. I told him, as you grow, in other words, as profits come in, what do you do with the profits? And I submit in India, one of our problems is that we immediately go for overconsumption. That we go immediately to, how do I build a 50 crore mansion? And I submit that is R&D money right there. Then we say we don't have money for R&D. And somebody builds a 50 crore house and doesn't have money for R&D. Let's say that I think right there your house is a solution right there, no? So.
Before we go to the next point, Mr. Vembu, I would like to share with you as well as our audience that right now it's 4:30 in India and it's 3 o'clock in 3 o'clock in the morning in California. And one of our good friends, Mr. Sridhar Rajagopal, has decided to stay up early this morning, or rather late last night, because he's a big fan of you, Mr. Vembu. So we appreciate Mr. Sridhar Rajagopal joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, looking at Zoho, Zoho has been around for the last 25 years and has been able to do very well as a product company, about being in the services market. But there have been several of our large IT companies in India that have been around much longer than 25 years, but they are still very much focused on services and not on that product space. That's number one. And number two is, even over the last 25 years, would you feel that Zoho perhaps has given rise to the spirit of more product startups within our environment? What are your take on these 2 points?
Yeah. This actually problem I had noticed early on. Services companies got into the same mindset of essentially reselling talent at the market, right? It became you buy talent and then you resell the talent. You don't control the output, okay? You don't own the product, finished product. You don't take the risk on the finished product, meaning that I'm deploying this talent for somebody else. They own the outcomes. And that is a low risk model, right? It's a low risk model. But necessarily, when you pursue that kind of a low risk model, you're also limited on, because the work output, the intellectual property is not, what the services company wants anymore. And the product is not part of their focus. And this model intrinsically is very hard to mix with the product model, because here we are coming up with our own product and we own the outcomes. That means, for example, I scrap a product, then I'm actually going to lose everything in that product that we put in, right? There's no backup. I mean, if I scrap a product, all the investment is gone. And that is like a movie that flops or a movie that never gets released, as an example. So that's why I gave the analogy of the movie industry, because that's, I don't know how to make movies, but I do know that the similarity involved is striking, where you bring together a team and you create a product that may or may not succeed. Sometimes it may succeed brilliantly, and often it fails. So that is the model that is very hard for a lot of low risk kind of expectation businesses to accept these models. But really, the highest risk from an economy perspective is not taking this risk at all. It's funny, what might be high risk for a business? For an economy as a whole, it's actually low risk, because we need to be in these products. We need to be able to build. Somebody has to skin this, and I submit the R&D required is not that costly. I'm personally working on R&D projects right now, where 20 plus engineers, myself closely, and these are not huge projects, but these could have a big impact if they succeed. That's the difference, and we need to get into that mindset in India.
Thank you. We would now like to take our first audience question. It is going to be from Mr. V.N. Shivashankar, who is Vice President of FICCI. Mr. VNS, can I request you to please go ahead with your question?
Good afternoon, Mr. Vembu. I have been a keen admirer and follower of you. First question I have is, how do you view the school educational system currently in India? And what are your thoughts on how this can be revamped? Because from it appears to be purely from a mark perspective and not from a skill perspective. Some thoughts on this, please.
So I actually, I just speaking to a government official just today on this. From our perspective in the industry, particularly in software industry, we don't actually value the degrees or the exam system. That is more and more companies are coming to this. Even Google announced they are not going to look at formal credentials. And many other companies in the US in particular have declared that the degree is irrelevant to them. And major venture capitalists are declaring that they won't look at the degree when they invest. So it's becoming more and more now standard practice to not look at the degree in the tech industry, at least. And it's worth understanding why that is true. And I can tell you our perspective from Zoho, that we noticed long time ago that the academic record of a person and the actual performance in the real world don't have a lot to do with each other. And there's no correlation. Does not be negative correlation. I don't want to say somebody who did well in college necessarily does poorly here. That's not what I mean. I mean that you take a person who did well, didn't do well, they both are equally likely to succeed or equally likely to fail. That's what I mean by no correlation, right? So the academic record is essentially irrelevant as a signal, mostly irrelevant. And the kind of college they went to is not that relevant either. Somewhat relevant only as a signaling device that they were determined to get to a good college, or maybe there is a signal, but the particular education they got is not that relevant to us. So this is very sobering if you're running a college. If you're a college professor, actually these are sobering conclusions. In fact, there is a college professor, you can look up this book called Kaplan, I think Robert Kaplan, Kaplan, and he's written a book called The Case Against Education. He's a professor at Georgetown University and economist, and he has written this very provocative book, The Case Against Education. He means case against college education, college. And he argues very strongly with evidence that college is not making a difference in the US context, at least. So in America, at least, these trends are very, very real now, where people are starting to rebel against college now, young people. And it will arrive in our shores, just like any other trend. At Zoho, we don't value the degree. And probably in some years, we will stop going to colleges for recruitment at all, actually. And that's, I won't be surprised if it happens. And we'll let people apply to us, but we won't go, right? So that is how indifferent we are to the degree, and we are indifferent to grades. And we don't even look at that. We don't even look at the grades, on any candidate we hire. We don't look at them to submit their degree certificates to us. We don't hold on to their certificates, nothing right now. All of that is forbidden in Zoho. So, and the exam orientation, actually, I'm coming to our school right now. We decided that our school will not have any focus on examinations at all. And only when somebody wants a government certification for something, would we train them for that particular test. That will be only in the last year or year and a half. That's it. Students can go through it. I'm not interested in that certificate, then they are not required to take any exam. We won't force them. Maybe the parents may be forcing, but the school will not force them. And some students actually already have declared, I'm not going to be interested in examinations. So all power to them. So we will train them to be, as Swami Vivekananda put, self-confident, self-reliant, and very grounded, cultured citizens who can actually take responsibility for themselves and responsibility for others. That is the goal of school, and not this certificate they have and these marks they got. That won't be the goal of the school. And again, Zoho University would look for similar. Zoho University also ignores in our hiring what the particular grades are, any of that. So that is our stance on education.
That's a very bold stand.
Yeah.
In fact, if you say that no examinations, I'm sure that my daughter would love an environment like that where there is no examinations.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there will be a lot of children as well who feel pressurized with examinations.
Yeah.
That must appreciate what Zoho has done in terms of transforming school dropouts, and also being able to take people from low-income households and training them to work for Zoho. This definitely has made an impact to people from all surroundings, and especially multiple lives. Certainly a very good effort. In this context, we also have a question from a student, Mr. Arvind Prakash. He is a final year mechanical engineering student from SSN College of Engineering. Can I request everybody to please mute their microphones? Thank you. And
Please go ahead.
this question actually surrounds the fact that what you've just mentioned in terms of why do we need examinations, and why do we need to go to college if we can still do well by ourselves. Mr. Arvind Prakash, are you still online? Mr. Arvind Prakash?
This is
Yeah,
here.
please
Good
go
evening,
ahead.
sir. Everybody, I thanks Security organizing this informative as well as inspiring discussion. I was actually going to ask if Zoho sees any correlation between academics and skills to excel as a professional. However, that question has been responded. In that case, I'm just curious to know to what extent Zoho would actually give importance to academics. Is there any importance that Zoho would give academics at all, to some extent at least? So that's the
We
question.
actually don't. We don't. We almost entirely disregard academic performance right now as a metric. We are not looking at GPAs. We don't particularly care if somebody has a high GPA or somebody has arrears. And we actually increasingly don't even care if they finish college at all. We will take applicants who are in their second year or third year if they want to drop out. It's up to them. They want to apply and we'll evaluate them anyway. So that is how indifferent we are to this. And our own Zoho University program, there's a lot of 18, 19-year-olds in the company who've joined after that 1 year of training in Zoho, and they're doing just fine. So that tells you that 4 years of college is not actually required to perform well on our job. And then why do we pretend as if it matters, right? And I'll tell you a deeper reason. I've been a student in IIT and I went through all the formal education. There are two major issues that arise in formal education. One is, let's say you are in mechanical engineering and you are taking a class on gearbox mechanisms, all that, whatever the power transmission, something they say, right? The gear systems. I'm not a mechanical engineering student. I was never was, but kind of can guess at something. Well, you are taking this class and it might even be interesting. You study it hard and you do well. And at the end of it, nothing, right? You are out of it. A year later, you had mostly forgotten it. In 5 years, you would have very little recall. Even for subjects we learned well, this is actually true. The reason is there is no context. You did not work in a gearbox facility. You did not actually put that to production. You did not have to support it. You did not have to see the problems that arise in building these things. We had some simulated experience, like maybe labs, maybe an industry visit. But at the end of it, unless you worked in that industry, let's say 5 years later, the mechanical engineering student becomes an IAS officer. That gearbox course is completely irrelevant now. It's forgotten. Nothing will be recalled. And I have actually, this is exactly true. You can verify this. For example, recently I was talking to a student who went through NEET as an example, and I asked him, do you recall something about benzene, the chemical molecule, right? You took NEET and I'm sure you did well in chemistry. He said, yeah, I recall benzene, but I don't recall very much about it. But I did write the exam. But since it was so much work to write all the exam, I'm glad I'm done with it. I don't have much recall. That's actually the result a lot of people with this exam-oriented systems produce. That I know, I've been a student, right? We used to, in IIT, we used to have a joke. We were electrical engineering students. We'll charge up the capacitor for the exam and it'll discharge it in the exam and the charge is gone. That means the knowledge is gone. I'm glad I'm rid of it, okay? This was actually the mindset. You charge and discharge it. Okay, that was the analogy we would use, because being electrical engineering students. And you'd say, oh, come on, you are cynical. But all students are like that. If you are forcing the exam, then my purpose is the exam. Why should I care beyond that, right? You have already given me the target. The exam is the target. And you can give me all this religion about, hey, your knowledge is important, but you are not the teacher. The system is not acting like the knowledge is important. The system is acting like only the exam is important. So I'm going to focus on the exam, right? That's the only thing you're evaluating me on. Incentives matter, right? In Zoho, if the only thing that matters is something, that's what all the employees will focus on. So that is what we have created, basically. That's what we have created. And it's very hard to undo this while also running these exams, running these grades, and also keep on exhorting students, don't focus on the exams only, please. You cannot have it both ways. That is why we decided not to focus on it. And we also philosophically don't agree with the system. So we don't actually look at the grades, look at the exams. And often when somebody comes with a very good degree, very good this thing, I tell them, I'm sorry to break it to you, it does not matter to us. So you might as well not have wasted your time. I joke with them. So
we now come to the end of the first section of the section, and we're already at 5:50. So I think we're enjoying ourselves. So let's see how much we can accommodate. Going on to the second section, which is on organization and role. Mr. Vembu, Zoho's goal has been to be focused as the operating system for businesses. How long do you think this will be a focus area? And you've also said that over the next 5 years, it will revolve into a cloud-centric business. What do you think will be next?
Yeah. So today, if you look at our software suite, it is actually quite broad, and the breadth and depth are improving with time even further. So even our own business, Zoho Corp, 10,000 employees spread around the world, it runs entirely on Zoho now. And we are deepening the product suite, broadening it to cover aspects that we have not covered yet. For example, manufacturing, a lot of that. And because we are not a manufacturing company, right? So we are broadening these things to cover these things. And so these are some of the areas of focus right now. And longer term, I suspect that this thing is real, where this revolution in cloud and mobile-based work, it's all real. And remote work, all of this is real. Because broadband is everywhere, and you look at how we are meeting today, right? Even with the hiccups, all the software will improve. These apps will be much better in a year from now. Much more smooth, all of that. Because all this experience is going into product design, and we ourselves are doing a lot of product innovations right now in this area. So 5 years down, I expect a lot more of these tools will be widespread in use. And therefore, these kinds of jobs can be in small clusters, rural clusters, what we are doing right now, that will spread to other companies. And this actually has an interesting effect on broader societal and the way economy is structured. Today, we worship urban areas like the center of all activity. If smart people leave and they take their jobs and income with them, and this is happening, there's a mass exodus out of San Francisco, mass exodus out of New York. Talent is leaving these areas. That will have a huge impact on culture, that will have a huge impact on regional economies, all of that. And I believe India also is going to see that, where Chennai and Bangalore are going to lose talent to smaller towns, villages, all of it. In Zoho itself, we are sparking that right now. And we have seen a lot of people now permanently relocate from Chennai. And we are going to see the trend accelerate. Other companies are going to get in on this thing. And this will have a dramatic effect on the economic viability of smaller towns and rural areas. And it would have also effect on culture, actually, because small towns have a distinctly different cultural mindset than the big cities. So these are things you're going to see, I believe, in the next 5-10 years.
In fact, we used to talk about a brain drain in the context of quite a lot of people from IIT leaving India and then going into the US and other parts of the world. I was asked this question some time ago, what do you think about that? And I was saying that in the COVID context today, Chennai is facing a brain drain, where quite a lot of people who are working in Chennai have been wanting to go back to their native villages in southern Tamil Nadu. And as you rightfully say, that's an issue that we will have to be able to contend with and see how to handle it. Mr. Vembu, when we look at Zoho's R&D spend, today you are spending 50% of your profits on R&D. That's huge by any means compared to quite a lot of other technology companies as well. Do you have defined metrics for this? Do you think such kind of spend is a sustainable measure?
Yeah. So it's in our industry, we have a lot more innovation to do and products to do, technologies to master. That's why we are doing this. The measure of sustainability is, are we able to finance it ourselves? Are we able to grow at a reasonable rate, all of that? And we are able to do that. We are growing fast and we are able to fund it. Our sales are progressing well. Our customer count is increasing rapidly. We are about 500,000 organizations around the world now. And so in the next 3-4 years, we'll be at 1 million organizations mark. And we are, if you look at our, for example, our measure of traffic, internet traffic, we are actually well ahead of a lot of companies you would think. For example, we are ahead of Slack right now in terms of our traffic, to give one example. So this is the metric that we use. And it's our R&D investment is what keeps the customers coming, because they always expect more from Zoho than they expect from other companies. So we have to keep that R&D pipeline busy. So that is why we do this.
I spoke about Zoho's marketing at San Jose Airport. I don't know if, to what extent you were able to hear me during the initial.
I heard you, yeah.
And so talking about marketing, what has been Zoho's experience with such a marketing spend, and what do you think about the results that it has yielded? the importance of such marketing for technology companies like Zoho and others?
So Zoho, the primary, our customer base is every organization that uses computers technology, right? Which is now every organization, really. So we have to reach them, and that's why we try mass market. In India, you've seen TV ads, you've seen full page newspaper ads, you've seen billboards, all of that. We do the same things in every market, particularly US. Now we have airport ads, we have television ads we have had. We have even thought about sponsoring the sports. We have actually done this with basketball games, all of that in the US, where there's a lot of people congregate. We will see Zoho billboards there. And we are planning to expand on this. 2020 was a difficult year because of pandemic, all of that. Marketing spend was curtailed, but in 2021 you will see a lot more of that happen in every market, in US, in India, in EU, in Middle East. Middle East, we have actually very fast-growing market for us, and we are producing commercials in Arabic, all of that too there. So that would be, you will see a lot more of that. Our goal is to be a globally well-known technology company. Like how Samsung is well-known in India, or Honda is well-known in India, Zoho will be well-known in Korea or Japan or in Germany or wherever. So that is the goal.
The next point is something that I've got to know is passionate to you. As a country, India as a country, we seem to be importing quite a lot of technology as well as goods and services compared to how much we are exporting. Even from our trade deficit, we are a net importer rather than a net exporter. And as you've rightfully of tech as well, you've also jokingly referred to India perhaps as the next East India company. This, in addition to the fact that you've been advocating about the establishment of product-oriented manufacturing units in India. For this to happen, we have to find the solutions for it. The entrepreneurs of today have to be able to have this access to critical financing that's going to keep them safe in their organizations rather than get carried away due to VC pressures and so on. How do you see this panning out?
Yeah. So if you look at first the trade deficit, I'll address the topic. We congratulate ourselves on prosperity, but a lot of our prosperity, we look at our household goods, so much of it is not made in India right now. Even simple items. I mean, right now I'm using a phone stand and I'm using a lighting, and all of these are imported from China. These fairly simple items of manufacture, we are not making them. Okay, and then meanwhile I'm deluged with job applicants in these villages. Okay, practically everywhere I go, people come to me for a job right now. It's very sad to see. I wish I could employ them all, but it's actually the reality on the ground. And the solution is right here. This that's behind me, which is lighting up this thing, and the phone stand where my phone is sitting, where I'm speaking right now. These kinds of products can be manufactured in rural areas. It requires entrepreneurs with that will to do it. Okay, this is not making these things is not like a 500 crore investment. It's not even 5 crore investment. These are probably, you can get started with 20 lakhs investment. Not the investment really. It's more of the will that I want to make something. That has to be there top to bottom in India. It has to be there in the rural areas. That has to be there in big industrial houses. Fortunately, as I mentioned, we have a very we have a trading culture in India that we will buy and sell. Why are these products distributed in India? Because it's easy to buy from China and distribute it here. But the same person who's distributing has to think, why don't I make it here? I'll employ the local labor and make it. That mindset has to be inculcated in us. And it's not just about, and what is happening because of this? We are selling our country in bits and pieces. You have to remember, when we import more than we export, we run a deficit. And how is that deficit bridged? Well, capital has to come in, and that capital is buying our assets. We saw this with Jio recently. Jio has taken in about 40 billion by selling itself in pieces, right? And our core assets in India are being sold like that. That is why I joked, if we sell enough, at some point, East India Company owns it, right? It's something we have to be aware of, by the way. This is not, economists and all that are often stupid. They don't even realize what it means to have lots of capital investment. That means we are selling our own assets, our own selves, our own land, our own factories, our own companies. All of that are being sold. And this might be celebrated as a great thing, but you have to remember that this is how we lost our independence once. Do we want to lose it again? right? So it's important actually from that perspective to have balance in trade. Okay, I'm definitely for global trade, but we have to be able to sell as well as buy. We have to be able to sell high technology as well as buy high technology. For that, we need the domestic know-how, and for that, we need the making culture, R&D culture. So it all starts from there. Do we want to build these things? And it is not something that is set up in a big lab or TAFR or somewhere. It means figuring out how to make better quality steel. It means figuring out how to make a better light stand actually for lighting device. Those are R&D too. That is what we have to do.
This question just came in from Mr. Sridhar Rajagopal from the US, and he says, how has Zoho Schools been able to inculcate this Make in India habit within itself?
Yeah. So our students, when they come in, they are 17 and or 18, and so they are a blank slate. They actually don't know what to expect. And we actually train them in software development, but we also train them in other areas. But we also give them a very hands-on, can-do spirit. Whatever it is a problem, I can put together a solution for it, and I can come up with a solution. I can hack something. So that making culture we inculcate, can-do spirit. In fact, that is what we are trying to do in our school also, which are called Kalaimani schools. We are trying to do that same thing, inculcate that culture of making things, okay, hands-on making things. That's actually very important. If you look at what distinguishes Germany, Switzerland, Japan versus a country like India, it is the can-do spirit, the discipline of making things, putting together things. That engineering is not about engineering colleges. Engineering is about the mindset, and that is what we have to inculcate.
You've spoken about Indian companies being perhaps more trading businesses focused rather than R&D focused. And in the context of trying to go into why this might be the case, you've spoken about perhaps the low self-esteem that might be among us post-colonialism, as well as what comes out of it being a mentality to follow rather than to lead. Yeah. What are your thoughts on how this can be addressed, at least within our future generations?
Yeah, this is actually a passionate topic of mine. And you look at our history of our country, this is not well appreciated even by ourselves. We are one of the most unusual countries in the world. Of course, one of the highest population. Not only that, but the diverse array of cultures, but also history. Not many countries have been under assault, essentially invasions, colonialism, all of that, for now over 1,000 years, going back about 1,100 years. Only in the last 70 years could we even call ourselves independent in that. Until then, we've been facing repeated invasions, attacks, constant churn. This has created in us a kind of a defeatist mindset that's ingrained. This is something I actually used to wonder as a teenager. Why are we so afraid? That's something that I remember asking myself, asking my teachers, all of that. We are a fearful people. Why are we so afraid? What are we afraid of? And then I slowly, that is what the psychological damage of all this does, where we are on the losing end, we are on the receiving end of all this. And so that mindset is what has produced low self-esteem, I would argue. Today, why is it that a city parent takes pride in their kid only speaking English and not Tamil, for example? Why is there not a single middle class person today would actually boldly declare my children should study in Tamil? I studied in Tamil medium schools, but I don't think any city parent would want this. They'll give you all this, what globalization, all of that. But Finland students are doing very well in the global market. Chinese are doing very well in the global market. Japanese are doing very well in the global market. They study in their own languages. We lack the self-esteem to say we can do this. Israelis have revived a long dormant language, Hebrew, and created a country out of it. Okay, and they are doing everything in Hebrew, and they are a technological leader, Israel, with a small population, about 9 million people. We, with 80 million people, think Tamil is not a viable language. People argue with me in Twitter that Tamil Nadu is too small to be this thing, while 9 million people can work in Hebrew, and something like 6 million people can work in Finnish. Something like 8 million Swedes can work in Swedish. Somehow 80 million people in Tamil Nadu cannot do this. This is the argument I get all the time. Okay, that is low self-esteem. That is not an argument. That is low self-esteem right there. And this is what we have to break through This has to start at the bottom. We cannot just be top down. It has to start at the bottom. We have to achieve tangible results. This is why I set myself up in a village, because I said my project starts here. It doesn't start in Chennai. It doesn't start in Delhi. It starts here. And that is why I'm here. Okay. This is my new birth in a way. I'm reborn and I'm here. And I'm going to the rest of my life, I'm going to spend in building this up from here. So it's a new adventure. And this requires an effort across our elite too. Our elite citizens, and a lot of us in this room are, right, in this meeting have to be conscious of our low self-esteem as citizens, as elite. Why are we so addicted to foreign brands? Why can't we buy Indian brands? Why are we so addicted to our children learning French as opposed to Sanskrit or Hindi, for example? These are the things we have to ask ourselves.
We'd now like to take questions from the audience. Mr. M.V. Subramaniam, our chair for our technology committee, and has been doing wonderful work for us within the last several months. Mr. M.V. Subramaniam, can I request you to please go ahead?
So to make a difference, probably I wanted Mr. Sridhar to talk in Tamil. Is that okay? எனக்கு ரொம்ப, அதாவது உங்ககிட்ட ரொம்ப பிடிச்சதே வந்து இந்த ஒரு இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் நீங்க கொடுத்தீங்க. ஏதோ ஒரு இதுல தமிழ்நாடு மட்டும், நம்ம இந்தியா மட்டும் மதர் டங்ல பேசியிருந்தா எல்லாரும் எல்லாமே ப்ராடக்ட் கம்பெனியா இருக்கும், சர்வீசஸ் கம்பெனியா இருந்திருக்காங்க. அது எனக்கு உங்ககிட்ட இருந்து கேட்ட பிறகு இட் மேக்ஸ் மோர் சென்ஸ். அதனால தமிழ்லயே உங்ககிட்ட ஒரு கேள்வி கேட்கலான்னு. நீங்க இப்போ பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கிற ஜோஹோ தவிர வேற ஏதாவது ஒரு இண்டஸ்ட்ரியில நீங்க மென்டர் பண்ற மாதிரியோ இல்ல நீங்களே இன்வால்வ் பண்ணி பண்ற மாதிரியோ எஜுகேஷன் அண்ட் சாஃப்ட்வேர் இல்லாம நீங்க எதுவும் பண்றீங்களா?
இப்போ பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கோம். வி டைட்டன் அப்படின்னு மெடிக்கல் இன்ஸ்ட்ருமெண்ட்ஸ் ஒன்று பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கோம். அப்புறம் சிக்னல் சிப்னு ஒரு சிப் கம்பெனி ஆக்சுவலி அதில் வந்து ஜோவோ இஸ் த மெயின் இன்வெஸ்டராக இருக்கும். இப்போ அது இந்த எல்டி மாடம் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காங்க. இப்போ தான் 2வது டேப் அவுட் நடக்க போகுதுங்க. அண்ட் அதே மாதிரி எல்டி ஃபுல் மாடம், ரொம்ப கஷ்டமான ப்ராஜெக்ட் அது. அதே மாதிரி ஜென்ட்ரான் லேப்ஸ்னு ஒன் ஆஃப் மை கிளாஸ்மேட்ஸ், ஆக்சுவலி ஐஐடி கிளாஸ்மேட்ஸ், இந்த கம்ப்யூட்டர் விஷன் எக்யூப்மெண்ட், இந்த இந்த பழ வகைகள் ஆப்பிள் ஆரஞ்சுலாம் வந்து இந்த டிஃபெக்ட் கண்டுபிடிக்கிறது. அது ஏன்னா எக்ஸ்போர்ட் மார்க்கெட்டுக்கு வந்து டிஃபெக்டிவாக இருந்தால் அந்த பழத்தை ரிஜெக்ட் பண்ணிடுவாங்க. ஃபாஸ்ட்டாக அது போகும்போது லைனில் போகும்போது ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணுறது அந்த கம்ப்யூட்டர் விஷன் வச்சு டிஃபெக்ட் கண்டுபிடிச்சி அது ஒரு 90 சச் எக்யூப்மெண்ட்ஸ் இந்த ஃபீல்டு. இப்போ ஹிமாச்சல் பிரதேஷ், பஞ்சாப், இந்த மாதிரி இடத்துல பெங்களூர் பேஸ்ட் கம்பெனி. ஸோ இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு 3-4 கம்பெனிஸ் இருக்கு. வி டைட்டன் ஒன்று, இந்த சிக்னல் சிப் அண்ட் ஜென்ட்ரான் லேப்ஸ். இதெல்லாம் சாஃப்ட்வேரே கிடையாது, இதெல்லாம் அதர் ஏரியாஸ், எல்லாமே டெக்னாலஜியாக இருக்கும், எல்லாம் ஸ்ட்ராங்காக இருக்கும். இப்போ நான் வந்து மேனுஃபேக்சரிங் இப்போ பார்த்துட்டு இருக்கோம். ஆக்சுவலி என்னென்ன மேனுஃபேக்சரிங் இங்கே லோக்கலாக என்ன பண்ணலாம் அப்படின்னு பார்த்துட்டு இருக்கோம். அண்ட் ஐம் ஐடென்டிஃபைங் சம் ஏரியாஸ் பண்ணுறதுக்கு. இதெல்லாம் பெரிய இன்வெஸ்ட்மெண்ட்டாக இருக்காது, பட் ஜாப் இன்டென்சிவாக இருக்கணும். இதுதான் என்னோட கோல். ஹவ் டு எம்ப்ளாய் அ லாட் ஆஃப் பீப்புள், பிகாஸ் மேஜர் எம்ப்ளாய்மெண்ட் கிரைசிஸ் இன் ரூரல் ஏரியாஸ். இங்கே பார்த்தாலே தெரியுது, வேலையே இல்லாமல் வந்து ஒரு வில்லேஜில் இருக்கிறது ஒரு 50% வேலையே கிட்டத்தட்ட இருக்காது. அந்த நிலைமையில் இருக்கு. ஸோ அதுக்கெல்லாம் என்ன பண்ணுறது அப்படின்னு தான் இப்போ யோசிச்சுட்டு இருக்கேன். வந்து
2வது இந்த ஆர்கனைசேஷன் கொஸ்டின். இப்போ வந்து உங்களுக்கு நீங்க ரிட்டையர் ஆகணும், நேராக ஜோஹோல இருந்து டைரக்டா பார்க்காம ரிட்டையர் ஆகணும்னு நினைச்சீங்கன்னா, நீங்க பப்ளிக் போயிருந்தீங்கன்னா உங்களுக்கு அது ஒரு பெரிய ஆப்பர்ச்சுனிட்டியா இருக்கும். உங்களோட எம்பையரை பெருசா பில்ட் பண்ணி உங்களோட ட்ரீமை, டாடாஸ் மாதிரி ஒரு ட்ரீம் வச்சிருக்கிறவங்களோ இல்லை ஏசி முத்தியா சார் மாதிரி ஒரு ட்ரீம் வச்சிருக்காங்களோ பப்ளிக் போயிட்டு அந்த ட்ரீமை அவங்க சாட்டிஸ்ஃபை பண்றாங்க. இந்த மாதிரி நீங்க எப்படி எக்ஸிட் பண்ணுவீங்க உங்க காலத்துக்கு அப்புறம் நீங்க வேற எதுவும் பார்க்கணும்னு நினைச்சீங்கன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க?
இல்லை, எனக்கு ரிட்டையர் ஆகிற மாதிரி ஒன்றும் இல்லை. ஐ வாண்ட் டு ஒர்க் அஸ் லாங் அஸ் ஐ கேன். அப்படிதான் இருக்கேன். இப்போ அது இன்னும் 10-20 வருஷத்துல என்ன ஆகும்னு தெரியாது. பட் ஐம் 52 now and I'm born in 68, 52 in 2021, I'll be 63 in June. ஸோ அப்போ அது என்ன ஆக போகிறதுன்னு அப்போ பார்த்துக்கலாம். அப்படி தான் என்னோட எண்ணம். அதுக்குள்ளே யாராவது சக்ஸஸர்லாம் அப்பாயிண்ட் பண்ணால் ஐ எம் திங்கிங் அபவுட் தட் ப்ராப்ளம். பட் நான் வந்து கண்டினியூ டு பி ஒர்க்கிங், ஏதாவது வேலை செஞ்சுட்டே இருப்பேன். எனக்கு ரிட்டையர் ஆகிற மாதிரி ஒன்றும் எண்ணம் கிடையாது. அதனால தான் ரூரல் ஏரியாவுக்கு வந்திருக்கேன். இப்போ மோர் ஒர்க் டு டூ. அதனால
மிஸ்டர் சுப்பிரமணியம் பேசினதுல இருந்து கண்டினியூ பண்ணிட்டு, மிஸ்டர் வேம்பு நீங்க வந்து ஒரு தமிழ் மீடியம் ஸ்கூல்ல படிச்சிருக்கீங்க 10வது வரைக்கும்.
ஆமா.
அதுல இருந்து நீங்க ஐஐடி சென்னைக்கு போயிட்டு பிரின்ஸ்டன் போயிருக்கீங்க, குவால்காம்க்கு போயிருக்கீங்க. இது ஒரு ரிமார்க்கபிள் அச்சீவ்மெண்டா இருக்கு. இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு படிப்படியா நீங்க முன்னேறி இருக்கிறது. அண்ட் நவ் யூ ஆர் லீடிங் அ வெரி லார்ஜ் சைஸ் கம்பெனி. இது வந்து ஒரு ஸ்மூத்தான ஜேர்னியா இருந்ததா? உங்களுக்கு ஏதாவது கஷ்டங்கள் இருந்ததா நடுவில்? How have you overcome this? Can you share this with our audience?
ஸ்மூத்தான ஜேர்னின்னு சொல்ல மாட்டேன். ஏன்னா பிஹெச்டி நான் பண்ணும்போது நான் பிஸ்னஸ்ல இருக்கிறதா எனக்கு அபிப்பிராயமே இல்லை. பிஸ்னஸ்ங்கிறது இஃப் யூ ஆஸ்க் மை பேரண்ட்ஸ், எங்கள் அம்மாவெல்லாம் கேட்டிங்கன்னா உனக்கு எப்படி பிஸ்னஸ் வரும் அப்படின்னு கேட்பாங்க. உனக்கு எப்படி பிஸ்னஸ் வந்தது அப்படின்னு கேட்பாங்க. இப்போ கூட உனக்கும் பிஸ்னஸ்க்கும் ஒன்றுமே சம்மந்தமே கிடையாது, உனக்கு கடைக்கு போக கூட தெரியாது அப்படின்வாங்க. விச் இஸ் ட்ரூ ஆக்சுவலி. வீட்டில் கூட ஏதாவது கடைக்கு போகணும்னா என் தம்பி தங்கையை தான் அனுப்புவாங்களே தவிர்த்து என்ன அனுப்ப மாட்டாங்க. உனக்கு ஒன்றும் வாங்க தெரியாது, போய் ஒழுங்காக பேச தெரியாது, அப்படிதான் நினைப்பாங்க வீட்டில். அண்ட் அது ப்ரொடெக்டிவ் வே, உனக்கு அதெல்லாம் தெரியாது அப்படின்னு. ஸோ நீ எப்படி பிஸ்னஸ் மேன் ஆன அப்படின்னு ஒரு கேள்வி வரும். ஆக்சுவலி அது காரணம், நான் பிரின்ஸ்டன்ல இருக்கும்போது பிஹெச்டி பண்ணும்போது லாஸ்ட் ஒரு 2 இயர்ஸ்ல எனக்கு வந்து ஒரு ரியலைஸ் இது வந்து எனக்கு பிடிக்கல, இந்த ஒர்க்கே பிடிக்கல, இந்த பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கிறது சரியில்லை அப்படின்னு தோணுது. அண்ட் ஐ வாஸ் டூயிங் வெல். Princeton considered me a good student, but I was not happy with the work. எனக்கு பிடிக்கல அது. ஸோ இப்போ என்ன பண்ணலாம்னு யோசிச்சிருந்தேன். அதே மாதிரி ஸோ ஒரு இன்ஜினியர் ஆகலாம்னு டிசைட் பண்ணிட்டேன். நான் வந்து இந்த பிஹெச்டி இந்த அகாடமிக் ஃபீல்டை விட்டுட்டு ப்ரைவேட் செக்டாரில் இன்ஜினியர் ஆகலாங்க. அப்போ தான் என் பிரதர் நானும் வந்து இந்தியாவில் ஏதாவது பண்ணணும்னு யோசிச்சு தான் அந்த ஒரு பெரிய மென்டல் சார்ட் ஆஃப் யூ ஹேவ் டு கோ த்ரூ சஃபரிங் டு கம் டு நியூ பாத். ஒரு சஃபரிங் வந்த அப்புறம் தான் புதிய பாதையே வரும். அதே மாதிரி தான் இந்தியா இந்த மாதிரி இருக்குது, நம்ம ஏதாவது பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு நினச்சி தான் என் பிரதர் குமாரும் நானும் பேசிட்டே இருக்கும்போது தான் இந்த இதெல்லாம் வந்தது, இந்த மாதிரி ஆரம்பிக்கிறாங்க. அண்ட் அதுவும் ஒரு இன்னும் புது பாத். அதே மாதிரி க்ளவுடுக்கு மூவ் பண்ணுறது, இந்த ஈவன் இந்த ரூரல், இப்போ இந்த ரூரல் இப்போ மூவ் பண்ணுறதே ஒரு வருஷம் 2 வருஷம் நான் வந்து திங்கிங் ஹார்ட். நான் கூட ஒரு நாள் ஒரு வருஷம் 2 வருஷம் அப்படியே பெரிய தாடி வச்சுருந்தேன். அண்ட் நம்ம சீஃப் மினிஸ்டர் வந்தப்போ கேட்டார், இது இவ்வளோ தாடி வச்சுருக்கீங்கன்னு. நான் இந்தியாவுக்கு மூவ் பண்ணுற வரைக்கும் தாடி எடுக்க போகிறேன் சம்மதம் வச்சுருக்கேன் அப்படின்னு. ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி நான் யோசிச்சிருந்தேன் ரொம்ப டீப்பாக என்ன பண்ணுறது அப்படின்னு. ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு இன்டர்னல் யூ ஹேவ் டு கோ த்ரூ ஆல் திஸ். ஸோ அது வந்து சஃபரிங் சொல்கிறதா என்னன்னு சொல்கிறதுன்னு தெரியல. யூ ஹேவ் டு ஹேவ் கொஸ்டினிங், யூ ஹேவ் டு ஆல் தட். ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி சமயத்தில் ஐல் பி வெரி கொஞ்சம் உள்ளுக்குள்ளே நிறையா இது இருக்கும், கொஸ்டின்ஸ். கோ த்ரூ தட் அண்ட் அப்புறம் ஸ்லோலி கம் அவுட் ஆஃப் இட். ஸோ அது ஸ்மூத்னா வந்து வெளியில் வந்து பார்க்கும்போது சம்வாட் ஸ்மூத்தாக இருக்கும், பட் உள்ளுக்குள்ளே நிறைய அந்த மாதிரி கொஸ்டின்ஸ் இருந்துகிட்டே தான் இருக்கும். ஸோ அப்படி தான் சொல்லுவேன்.
While I would like to continue our discussion in Tamil, perhaps to some extent, I have to also understand that some of our audience might not be fluent in Tamil. So for the benefit of everybody, I'm switching back to English. Thank you all for your understanding. Mr. Vembu, during your Princeton days, you gained a keen interest in politics and political
Actually,
science.
அது வந்து ஸ்கூல் டேஸ்ல நான் பிரின்ஸ்டன் டேஸ்ல இல்லை, ஸ்கூல்லேருந்தே நான் வந்து 1977 எலெக்ஷன் எனக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்கு, அந்த போஸ்ட் எமர்ஜென்சி எலெக்ஷன்.
So rather than saying politics, let me call it political science and economics as well. Yeah. And you believed at that time that India's problem is its socialism. Could you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I actually நான் வந்து 80s முழுக்க நான் ஸ்டூடெண்டாக இருக்கும்போது, ஐஐடியில் இருக்கும்போது கூட அப்போவே எனக்கு புரிஞ்சது வந்து 87 எனக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்குதெல்லாம் டிஸ்டிங்க்ட்லி நம்மளோட ப்ராப்ளமே வந்து நம்மளோட சோஷலிஸ்ட் அப்சஷன்.
Mr. Vembu, sorry to interrupt. Can I request you to continue in English?
Yeah, sorry. So even as of primary, like as a student in IIT, and I was actually even in school, I had this inclination slowly. I had a communist teacher, so we used to debate this in 10th standard. I would tell him, if your revolution as you predict is coming, then we'll all become public sector workers. But look at our public sector today. Look at our telephones. Look at our railways. And are they well run? And do you want the whole economy to be like this? I mean, I will ask that question of my teacher in school. So I was never a believer in communism because I could see the results, and I could already see countries like the Soviet Union crumbling, and it crumbled in 6-7 years later. So communism was a dead end. And India, thanks to Indira Gandhi's genius, we put socialism in our constitution. So we became a socialist country in name at least. So a lot of this were actually, I was strongly opposed to the socialism as a concept. It never works. It has never worked anywhere. It has produced mass death everywhere. So I was well aware of this. And also you have to remember, I was influenced by, for example, Arun Shori in English, writing in English, and Mr. Cho Ramaswamy writing in Tamil, all of that. So I had a strong influence from them too. So even in my school, college days in IIT, all of that, I was an anti-socialist, strongly. And in Princeton, that continued. I wasn't actually that politically active in Princeton. I wasn't interested in American politics as much. I'm more interested in Indian politics, right? And I actually had picked up more of the economic underpinning, and I was thinking about India's problem in the context of India's problems. For example, I read everyone from Milton Friedman to Friedrich Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, all of those books. Those things definitely had an influence on me in terms of the notion of capitalism as a foundation of freedom. And that's actually an important idea, that it is private capital that actually is the guarantor of freedom. If the government owns everything, none of us are free. We are serfs. That is the message of The Road to Serfdom by Hayek. So these are actually important things I picked up. Private capital is also the foundation of a moral citizenry, because we can actually act according to our conscience. And morality is ultimately acting in accordance with our conscience. So it's important. Government cannot legislate these things. It has to come from within. And that can only happen through the foundation of private capital that comes from effort, honest effort. So these are important ideas I picked up from my school and college and later this thing. And then in business, I continued with this. And in the Indian context, this capital means, for example, my fixing the village pond here and directing the banks is capital building, because that is important for the next crop cycle, where if the pond can hold more water, it can store more water, it helps the farmers. So those are the kinds of things that capital building activities we have to do at the local level. And again, it's not, you cannot rely on government in Chennai or Delhi fixing these things. We have to have local capital, local citizens pooling our efforts to. That is what I believe.
We now move on to the fourth section, which is the next generation inputs. And before I continue, my motivation today to wear Veshti Satta was Mr. Vembu, that you would be doing that, and I wanted to keep company with you.
Yeah.
But we don't see you in Veshti Satta.
I'm actually wearing it, you can see, with my shirt and
Thank you. So we were also hoping that we might be able to see the beautiful scenery that you showed us in Tenkasi.
I'll take you outside and see if we can.
I think we are having a bit of audio problem because of the connection.
Outside and,
Hi.
Can you see me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you can probably see let me just try to change So this is some of the scenery. You see our farm around here, and there's a lot of, you'll see a lot of peacocks. In that area there, I'm showing, we have a lot of, right now we have planted this thing, sesame seed, for the sesame oil in Nalanda. So, and we have a lot of vegetables planted, and we have amla, nellika plants here, and so a lot of that going on agriculture. You cannot see it from here. And so I'm surrounded by a lot of, this is my auto, electric auto. There's actually a friend visiting me as a Jeep, he's visiting me. This is my own vehicle. This is what I ride around, the local village and all of that. So this is my life now. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much.
This is where I have meetings. In this bench here. So, yeah. Thank you.
Bench உட்கார்ந்திருப்பீங்களா இல்ல தரையில உட்கார்ந்திருப்பீங்களா?
Now usually I'm seated on this platform, and we have this, and thoroughly ukarvom. Sometimes when it gets too many people, we sit on the floor.
Okay.
And a lot of our visitors sleep on the pai here. From a pai mat, straw mat. That's where a lot of us sleep, because sometimes the crowd gets big here because I'm here. A lot of people visit, and 10 people visit. I don't have enough beds, so we actually sleep on the mat.
Very good. So before we go on to our next question, I would also like to share with our audience that Mr. Vembu walks 12 kilometers every day in Tenkasi as part of his exercise, and better yet, he also swims. He also swims 2 kilometers every day
Yeah.
in the nearby lake, and that's how he is able to keep himself fit.
Yeah,
So that's for the benefit of.
I actually, yeah, I walk a lot. Most of my meetings are walking meetings. I swim a lot. So because that gives me sort of that's my relaxation too, because I'm thinking, sitting in the water, I'm thinking. So.
Mr. Vembu, our next Mr. Murli Nair. He is based in Bombay, and can I request all our audience to kindly mute their mic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please go on.
Mr. Murli Nair. Mr. Murli Nair is based in Bombay, and he's CEO of one of the fastest growing financial tech companies in India. Murli, can I request you to please go ahead?
Thank you very much, Arun. Mr. Vembu, it's indeed an honor to talk to you. I run a company called Zeta, which is founded by Bhavin Turakia, basically. We are in the banking technology space, so we are trying to follow your footsteps and create products right here in India, Mr. Vembu. The question I had for you, Mr. Vembu, is on for the next generation. If you were to give advice to the next generation on how they should manage their lives, one, and secondly, well, how should they approach technology? So these are two questions that I had in terms of getting inspiration from you. What should the next generation think about? How should they manage their lives? And secondly, what should their approach to technology be?
One of the things that I would have young people focus on is find something purposeful to do. Right.
Actually, to quickly interrupt you, Mr. Vembu, if I might also add to that, maybe you can also answer the question as to how we should be nurturing talent in addition to Mr. Murli Nair's question.
Yeah. Let me come to that next time. So have a firm, find a purposeful, meaningful thing to do, right? A lot of times we are sort of, our lives are like, we just are floating like a catamaran without any direction. So having a firm purpose in life actually is useful, and you have to find it. I cannot supply that to you. Nobody can supply that to you. Nobody should supply that to you. You have to find it in your own inner voice. That's more a spiritual quest than just something like a management advice. So that is important. And it's useful to be grounded. It's useful to have faith. And faith, I don't mean in a religious faith sense alone. Faith in something, faith in an idea, faith in a purpose, faith in your, something larger than yourself, you have to believe it. And we can call it God, but it's actually, to me, that faith itself has the power of God to inspire you. That having that firm faith. And you need that foundation, you need to be rooted in that faith, rooted in that, underlying bedrock for you to actually withstand the adversities in life. Because it always happens to all of us. Something bad always happens. So we have to be prepared to face adversity. And the second one you asked in terms of what was the question again? I remember the talent build up. What is the second question, sir?
Mr. Murli Nair, please go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if he's.
One was
technology. Yeah, in terms of technology, how should the next generation approach technology, Mr.
I am actually, for a technology company, I am surprisingly, I don't want to overvalue technology, including my own technology, right? Technology is important. Technology is an instrument. We should not elevate technology to be the sole determining of happiness in our lives. So technology we should use as an instrument for a broader purpose rather than the sole purpose of life. So that's actually very important, because today technology can cause addiction. Technology can cause a lot of ills too. And we have seen this, right, in recent times. So it's important to put technology in perspective. And I actually said recently in an interview, money itself is a technology, not a value system. So an obsession with money is an obsession with technology too, right, in a way, because money is a kind of technology for exchange of goods and and creating an economy. Money is a technology. So we have to have that appropriate place for technology that is rooted in value systems, morality, that is broader and rooted in faith, rooted in culture, and rooted in traditions. All of that is important too. So that is what young people should remember, because technology for its own sake, and this is actually something our religious saints have said this, intellect, pure intellect without a value system will just find faster and faster ways to destroy itself. That's exactly like we have all these atom bombs, we can bomb each other into death, right? That's the same idea. Pure intellect without underlying value system will destroy us. So we need to be grounded, and technology needs to be grounded in a broader moral universe, broader conception of the world, our purpose, all of that, our role again with nature, our role with other people, communities, all of that is important. That's what I will tell young people.
Very good. For the benefit of our audience, I would like to let you know that Mr. Vembu is sitting in his electric auto that was built in Coimbatore. And he has a 20-kilometer ride to his office. The traffic that he has is cows, buffaloes, and goats. And he says that it's an enjoyable journey for him, and I'm sure that us would like to experience it as well. Mr. Vembu, we now go to the next audience question. This is from a student, Ms. Swati Chandrasekharan. She's a final year student at SVCE and supposed to be joining Zoho shortly. Ms. Swati, can I request you to please go ahead?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I don't think she is online, but her question, Mr. Vembu, is quote, "One thing that I want to mention about Zoho is its simplicity. I personally experienced it during my recruitment process.
Yeah.
How the simplicity helps Zoho to reach heights, and what qualities would you consider to be very important for an employee?" Unquote.
Yeah. So one of the, I don't like to think of it as simplicity as much as avoiding pretense, right? And I'll tell you a true story. This happened about 6-7 years ago. I was invited to a meeting by a CEO of a software company who actually wanted to pick my brains, and he said, I want to learn from you, and I want you to tell me how we can be like Zoho. Okay, I went to their offices. So I won't name names because there's no reason to. And I went there, and we were sitting in this very plush room that is a CEO office. And we are talking about how to inspire engineers to excel. And I told them, maybe, you should get out of this room first, because you are in this room and you are actually cut off from your engineers. And you are summoning engineers here, and they are intimidated when they see you. They are actually not connected to you. And then we actually, at the end of the meeting, we get out. And there's an orderly or somebody who opens the elevator and keeps the elevator free of everybody, no obstruction. Then we don't go down to the elevator, and a car is parked right there, and a luxury car. And I don't remember, maybe a Benz or BMW is parked, and the driver keeps the back door open, and we get into the thing and we drive away. And I told them, this whole setting is kind of, you've alienated yourself, you've imprisoned yourself from your own people. Do you realize that? I told them that if you actually connected better with them, and maybe you will actually have better results, then you don't have to ask my advice, and you will know exactly what your problems are. And so I don't know if they ever changed. Okay? I don't know if they changed, because sometimes, we don't realize management imprisons itself from their own employees. Okay, so what you think of as simplicity is my being free. I like my freedom to roam around. Actually, in Zoho, I'll be roaming around the campus because I like to roam around, actually. And if I have 18 people following me, and if I have to have my assistant and everybody following me, I'm imprisoned. In fact, one of the things I actually joke around when I meet a famous politician somewhere is, how do they ever get to go to the bathroom? Because they're always surrounded by 18 assistants, right? So that's, it's a joke, but actually I mean it, because it's tough to be yourself when you are constantly being waited upon and all of that. So what you think of as my simplicity is my freedom, actually, to be myself. Okay, I like to be free. I like to ride around in the auto, and if people are fussing about me and 18 cars have to follow me, then I'm not free, right? So that is what you think of as simplicity, but it's really more selfish freedom.
A few words on family. I've had the opportunity to meet with your father twice. Once here in Chennai and the other in your when you hosted me in Pleasanton. And I can certainly see where you get your humility from. What are the other values that you've been able to imbibe from your parents?
Yeah, my parents still live in their own home they built in 1982. Way before any of this happened, right? And they're still in the house, and my mother still cooks at 75, and when I go visit my parents, she still cooks, and I have to eat her home cooked food, and she says I'll do it as long as I'm able to, and she's still going strong, thankfully. And my father still goes for a morning walk in the local neighborhood. So he is there. They from the beginning we didn't have much money. We grew up with very little, but we had lots of love, and we also had the lessons of, for example, living within our own means, not actually spending because other people are spending. Just because some neighboring kid has something, that doesn't mean we have to have it. Those are values that they taught us from childhood, and that still stays with me. And both my parents, are very humble in their approach to life, and that is something that I hope to emulate. And my sister already reminds me, you're not like our parents. You are actually a little more flamboyant. She tells me, and she considers me flamboyant, right? But I still like to emulate my parents in this. Unfortunately, I'm a little too prominent now, but that's actually part of what my parents also like to stay in the background. They don't like to limelight, right? My mother is very shy, and my father also is shy, so it's difficult for them to handle limelight. And while I have to be used to it, right? And my job requires it now. So in that sense, I have to be different. But still, these are things I've learned from my parents, and I'm still thankful for all this. And I hope to pass it on to our next generation too.
The Siki 360 team, that I have to get to the last question, but I wanted to ask one more question prior to that, which I thought I'll take the liberty because of the bold statements that you also made. I thought I can ask this as well. I know that you have a good interest for nature and greenery, both in the US and in India. And we can all very well see it in your campus in Tenkasi. You've moved your operations to a village, and you also encourage other firms to shift their businesses to rural areas. However, if this happens, don't you think it will impact the villagers' simple way of living, alter their community sentiment, their prevalence of values and aesthetics? Because when you look at it, this is what happened to our cities today, which were once villages.
Yeah, this is actually a really good question. It will only happen if we drastically increase the population. Okay. In other words, we have lots of migrants here, and this 1,000 people or 2,000 people village becomes suddenly 10,000 people. Then, yeah, it'll completely change it. But that's not what I have in mind, actually. And we are actually spreading ourselves around so that no place we have to kind of suddenly grow very big. We'll grow big by distributing our people around. And that is actually important. This question is very important. I know where it's coming from. I actually often say this in this village. My goal in coming here is not to change it into another city. It is to create opportunities for the people already here, and similarly, opportunities for wherever we are in other villages too. So that's important, because if this becomes a boom town, then you are absolutely right. We bring the whole set of problems we try to escape. And the problem with a place like Chennai now is the extraordinary amount of migration it has taken. And these boom towns, migrant boom towns, you can see it in the West. This happened in New York, it happened in San Francisco, all these places kind of become totally unrooted. Like nobody belongs there, nobody belongs anywhere. And that creates a lot of these. And economists will celebrate migration. It's an unvarnished good thing. But the same economists would they want, hey, my children will go away somewhere, I won't see them much, all that. They don't actually have solutions to those. They think those are all collateral damage. But in reality, that feelings are important. People's subjective ideas about well-being are very important, because that's what I feel inside, right? And so my own ideal economy is you create local industry. We can create the local now. Technology enables it now. Cloud technology enables us to For example, if I want to know how nanotechnology works, with one or two experts here, we can actually create a small nanotech lab in this village. I mean it. So that is possible in a lot of remote places. And we have to seize that moment, seize this technology, the potential of broadband to create these jobs, local jobs, and create local, viable local economies. So, and that does not have to drastically alter the culture. It will evolve. Prosperity always evolves people in some ways. So that is necessary because the same villagers here also are desperately poor, and we have to solve this problem of poverty. And we cannot, in the name of culture preservation, we cannot actually have poverty, so much extensive poverty. At the same time, I'm not addicted to money. I live a simple life. It does not mean that some person who does not have 2 proper meals a day and does not have anything, I should preach them simplicity. I should show them ways to make more money right now. That is my duty. So
This now brings us to the last question for today. Of course, we had to curtail our questions because of time. We never wanted to exceed 5:30. Yes, we had a bit of a late start, but we still wanted to see if we can wrap up by 5:30. The next question is a question from the audience. This is from Mrs. Valli Arun, who's the chair of the SICKI 360 committee.
Good evening, Mr. Vembu. Very nice to meet you in your beautiful environment. I have a quick question for you. You seem to be a people's person with socialist views and also a desire to empower rural India. So does this mean there is going to be an entry into politics at any point?
I knew that word was coming. This is how I'll put it, okay? I'm actually a political person in the sense that I've always been interested in politics. But I have a mission right now. I have to build this company up and a lot of rural jobs to create, a lot of rural initiatives to right now unveil. So for the next at least few years, I will not be interested in active politics. Beyond that, I won't neither rule it out nor rule it in. Life will take its own course. So that's how I'll say it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vembu. It's been an excellent discussion with you, covering multiple areas around yourself. Certainly appreciate the time that you have spent with us and patiently answer each one of our questions. As a token of our appreciation, as new as SICKI 360, we have the habit now of contributing in the name of our esteemed guests to organizations that are in need of finance. So there is one such organization called the Kanchi Kamakoti Child Hospital, which has been doing significant service for both children as well as especially those from the underprivileged society. So we have contributed to them in your name, and we will be sending this certificate to you in the course of time.
Actually, I recently joined the board of directors there, so it's very timely. Thank you very much.
And the second thing, as well as part of the SICKI 360 culture, we would certainly like you to autograph your photographs as well as dated with today's date. We will have these photographs sent to you, and certainly look forward to your autographing them in the course of time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, thank you very, very much for joining us, and certainly look forward to your inputs as we move along. I would like to share with you, as well as the rest of our audience, about a very interesting program that SICKI has put together. This is called the Global Tech Trends Conclave, and this is scheduled to be held tomorrow, January 7th, from 7 to 9. This, incidentally, is going to be jointly organized between SICKI and the ATEA, which is the American Tamil Entrepreneurs Association. For some of you who might be aware, SICKI had conducted the Yadumure Global Conclave along with the government of Tamil Nadu, where we had reached out to more than 300 Tamil associations worldwide, covering about 40 countries. And we had about 3,400 people visiting us. This was during the month of October. The idea behind this was to be able to propel Tamil across the world, as well as invite our own people back to our state to be able to invest here and grow here. It is with that in mind that we got into contact with ATEA, and we're very glad that we are doing this program jointly with ATEA. The aim of the conclave is being able to analyze trends and technologies that have threatened to establish business models that have been existing for long, and also in the course wipe out slow to adapt companies, which and in turn leading to next generation of technology giants. The speakers for this session is going to be from the government of Tamil Nadu as well, Mr. Hansraj Verma, who's the additional Chief Secretary of the Information Technology Department. We're going to have Dr. Sanjay Tyagi, Director STPI Chennai. We are going to have Dr. Bhaskar Ramamurthy from IIT Chennai. We are also going to have three gentlemen from the US, Mr. Ram Nagappan, Mr. Lena Kanappan, as well as Mr. Andy Nalappan. We are also this session is run by our technology committee chaired by Mr. M.V. Subramaniam, and they've done a very good job in propelling SICKI's foray within the technology side. Again, this is going to be held tomorrow, which is January 7th, and it is going to be held online, WebEx again. We look forward to your participation with us. If you want more information, please feel free to join us. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the SICKI 360 team who has put this series into a very good effect in the past as well as going forward. This committee is chaired by Mrs. Valli Arun, President of the Velengro Group and Trustee of the Tamilisai Sangam. The committee is co-chaired by Professor T. Murugavel, who's head of the Department Humanities and Social Sciences at SVC Chennai, and who incidentally is in charge of bringing up the required discussion points for each of our SICKI 360 series. We have Mr. Vinod Solomons and his very effective team representing the SICKI Secretariat. We have Mr. Gokul Santanam, who's Senior Vice President of Marketing, who's Environment Consultant at the Asian Development Bank. Both of them together have moderated our questions today so that I can put them forth to you in the course of time. We also have Ms. Vilasini Meenakshi Arun, who's a student of clinical psychology representing the student community. Our next SICKI 360 session, friends, is going to be with Mr. Vishwanathan Anand, Grandmaster. This session was actually postponed twice. One, of course, was due to the cyclone, and the second one was considering his schedule. We've again scheduled this program for next month. This is going to be session 5 of the SICKI 360 series. It's scheduled for Thursday, February 11th. We kindly request you to mark your calendars and join us. Again, this is going to be held on online mode over WebEx. That brings us to the end of today's program. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Sridhar, for joining us. Thank you very, very much to each of our audience as well for having joined us. We certainly look forward to your ongoing participation with us. And I would certainly like to take this opportunity on behalf of SICKI to wish each one of you a very happy Pongal, you as well as each of your family. And I'm sure that our backdrop today is very apt for this important festival of ours. Thank you very much. Nandri, Vanakkam.